Hi, I am Elizabeth Shea, and I'm with REQ. We're an agile company, and I'm the EVP for the Public Relations Department. And I'm super excited, given that B2G has been a core competency of the companies for many, many years. I won't let the marks tell how long ago that was, but let's say it's been a long time. And I'm very excited to have a group of panelists with us today, including REQ's own Kenny Rufino, who's our creative director, and has been very impressed with the work. My company was acquired by REQ about 5 years ago, and so that's how we got to know Kenny. And he does just brilliant work with some branding initiatives and campaigns. Then we also have Kathy. I should be letting you guys introduce yourself, but Kathy with Everfox, Rikki with Voyatek now, right? It's been with us for quite some time. And then Jordan with Rise 8. We're really excited to have you all here. So today we're going to talk about B2G operating in a sea of sameness. So I will say that the reason and the inspiration for this webinar came about when we had a conversation, and I believe with Sue Keith. I need to also introduce Sue Keith, who's our co-sponsor, of course. And we'll let her introduce herself when we go around the room. But to the extent that we came up with this topic, because, gone are sort of the days where websites or branding included pictures of the Capitol. What does it look like today? And how do you look to stand out in that sea of sameness so that you can really differentiate yourselves? So we have a great panel today. I will turn it over. Let's start with you, Sue. You want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see a lot of familiar names. I am Sue Keith. I'm with Ceres Talent. We are a recruiting firm based here in the DC area, Reston, for those of you who are local. We specialize exclusively in marketing, communications, and product positions. I should throw creative in there too, Kenny. And this conversation is especially timely since we are in the process of a rebrand, and we will be becoming Landrum Talent Solutions effective July 1. This has been out there in the world, so this isn't breaking news, but that's because we joined forces with another firm that specializes exclusively in HR positions, and combined we will be Landrum Talent Solutions in just a couple of weeks. So really good timing on this conversation.
Excellent. Why don't I turn it over to you, Kathy? Quick introduction and
hi everyone.
Your background and why you're here. Why we asked you to be on the panel.
Hi everyone. I'm Kathy Quinn. I lead the marketing team for Everfox, which is a recently carved out company. We used to be part of ForcePoint, but we were recently purchased by TPG, a private equity firm. And we just had the great experience of, in about 12 to 13 weeks, launching a new brand and, a new company. So it's been an exciting time for us at Everfox. But I've been doing B2G for more years than I care to admit, but let's just say 20 plus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. Rikki, how about you? Turn it over to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Rikki Rogers. I head up marketing at Voyatek. We are formerly GCOM and Encore. Encore and GCOM merged in August of last year. So it was the perfect time to rebrand, or really internally, we've been referring to it as a new brand because it's coming together of two kind of equally sized companies. So I'm excited to talk all things B2G branding.
Excellent. And by the way, I might go on mute from time to time, not to be rude, but I've got a really bad cold, so I'm coughing a little bit. I'm trying to keep that off the recording. Jordan, how about I turn it to you?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm the director of marketing at Rise 8. Rise 8 focuses on elite software development for the federal government. And we are currently in what we're calling phase 1 of 3 for kind of a brand expansion project. So I think there's been a lot of great work done with our brand already. And we are just kind of evolving it a little bit and tweaking it a little bit. So my team, who may be here today, playing a big part of that as well. And so we're excited to kind of go through the process and share some insights of where we are and the journey.
Excellent. Thank you. And let's turn to you, Kenny.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kenny Rufino. I'm an EVP and the creative director at REQ. I've been with REQ for a little over 10 years now, but I've been working in the design space and leading creative teams I'm going to echo what Kathy said. For 20 plus years, let's not go into specifics, but it's been a while. I'm here really because I love the world of brands. I don't think you need to be in B2C or, to be excited about brands. There's so many sort of moving pieces that are really exciting to me sort of as a creative professional. Particularly what interests me, I think, about the world of brand is sort of how things manifest themselves physically. We work with a really brilliant senior brand strategist. I don't know if he's on here now. I'm going to beg his forgiveness if I butcher anything that he usually says. But I think for me, it's sort of seeing it come to life and sort of what that looks like, what it feels like, the materials that are used and everything that really sort of drives me. So great to meet you all.
Excellent. Okay, well then let's start with a softball question and then get and then give a little bit more granular. And by the way, from a housekeeping perspective, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. Maybe you said that already, Elizabeth. I didn't see that, but feel free to put it in the chat. We will ask you to unmute and come off of mute and ask the question to one of the panelists if there's something that so inspires you. So the more interactive, the better. So let's start. I'm going to direct this to you, Kathy, first. If you can tell me a little bit about what branding means to you and or why, what sort of your journey looked like when you decided that you were going to rebrand and what did that mean to you?
Sure. We were both scared and excited because we had a very short timeline to take the concept of what we believed our corporate culture to be and what we wanted our new company to be. Our transaction finished September 30th, and we knew that we were going to have our sales kickoff at the end of January. So we had from October to really December to define our brand identity and establish a new name, a new look and feel, mission statement, all of the core elements that go with starting a company. Our journey was, it was pretty smooth. We had a great partner, and we were fortunate that they have something called a brand lab. TPG, the private equity firm that purchased Everfox, has several companies in their portfolio, so they've developed a compressed brand cycle to go through. So that's what we did. The most important thing for us in the process was knowing from the get-go what were the core tenets or beliefs that we wanted represented in our brand. But equally important was knowing what we didn't want to do. We did not want to create a word. We did not want to be in a situation where we had to spend so much time explaining what the name of the company is and why we chose it. So we went a very straightforward route. We wanted real words. We wanted it to tie to what we do. We ended up with Everfox, because we have been in cybersecurity for 25 plus years. We're one of the longest cybersecurity vendors in tenure. And then equally important was the Fox to us. Foxes are problem solvers. They also, they're one of the few mammals that actually uses tools. So we really thought in terms of combining the two, Everfox, it really gave us a great feel for who we are as a company. We also like the use of outfoxing. We think we outfox a lot of our competitors in how we build and deliver things. So for us, Everfox was a great fit.
Elizabeth, you're on mute.
I knew this would happen. You don't have to. Okay, there you go. Kenny, can I turn it to you? Oh, tell me what you think are the core elements of a brand, and I'm curious any reactions you have to Kathy since you didn't hear her on the prep call.
Yeah, sure. So
Oh, like putting you on the spot.
we like to define brand as something as it's really this emotional connection. And it's a reason to really believe and to feel connected to something. It's how, customers feel about an organization. It's about how your employees feel, about the organization. It's this weird sort of intangible kind of ethereal thing. You've got the physical side, like the logo and the colors and all of that, but you've also got like this equally important emotional side, what the tone's like, the story, and so forth. And it was nice hearing Kathy sort of explain that very quickly the origin of the name and sort of, what they're representing. But yeah, what were you asking me to comment on?
I was just curious what you thought, since you hadn't heard her story yet.
I love hearing the stories of brands. Like I honestly, it's very surprising. I think, like, even with brands that I use on a day-to-day, to kind of learn a little bit more about sort of what they stand for. Some brands are more explicit about it than others. Certainly, you can think of Patagonia and sort of how they're very explicit with what they stand for, what they believe in, right? Nike's great example, of course. B2G is something a little bit, there's this untapped potential there, I think. We're starting to see sort of the floodgates open about how B2G is actually really ripe for a lot of creative possibilities. So.
Very interesting. Well, I'd like to turn it over to Jordan, because Jordan is not going through a rebrand, perhaps, of a company name, but can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what you've experienced, or why now? Why is this important to you now?
Yeah, so for us, I guess there were a few reasons. First and foremost, even when I came on board, so I've been on board for about a year now, but we are scaling extremely fast. And so, new risers, which we call them, or colleagues, nobody knows what we do. And so, Kenny mentioned like kind of the emotional side of a brand, and even like there's obviously like the look and feel and branding and colors. We feel we're really strong there, but it was overall in our messaging and even our services offering. And so that was one issue when people were asked, what does Rise 8 do? We had a very hard time, and I think everybody has a very hard time kind of explaining it. And so we're looking for more consistency in kind of our product frameworks and messaging works. And as we started that, it was like, well, let's look at the bigger picture as we build up this core services offering and packages, because then you start to get into, well, and how does that actually interact with your look and feel and the color palette existing as you bring in like 5 new products or 5 new services offerings. So that was kind of like one, nobody knew what Rise 8 did. We are expanding. We have Predacity, which is an event. We're going into our 3rd year, which uses very same color palette, same fonts as Rise 8. We have a product now called Tracer, which we're just kind of launching. And so as we look forward to the future, are we set up today to bring on these new product offerings and then give Predacity its own look and feel and further distinguish it from Rise 8? And so we just felt it was kind of a good time to kind of combine efforts, since we were looking at our core services, core packaging, had an event that's really kind of taking off and now starting to get into the product space. It really required us to just look at everything that we're doing across our marketing mix and see, like, do we have the right guidelines in place today that allow us to this flexibility and scalability into these different paths? And we felt that we didn't. And so coupled with the fact that nobody knew what we did and further kind of scalability and expansion needs, it just seemed like it was the right time to kind of make the move.
No, that's excellent. And particularly because that there was such a timing constraint potentially, that's always important. I think about, Kathy, you mentioned that you didn't have a very long period of time to be able to do that. Rikki, I would love to hear from you about the kind of time that took for you to go through that process, and what were the considerations of the timing for the launch?
Yeah, we decided to rebrand last year. Like I mentioned before, after Encore and GCOM came together, it was a unique merger / acquisition, because even though technically GCOM did acquire Encore, the companies had kind of a similar longevity. We both had pretty strong reputations in each of our industries, and both of us had similar, not identical, but large employee bases that were really committed, lots of tenured employees. And so we wanted to create a new brand as part of the effort of bringing both companies together. And it was very important to our CEO and our leadership that the brand name really felt like it was a bottom up, not a top down effort. The last thing that the leadership wanted to do was just, choose a new name and then kind of proclaim to all of our employees and customers, like, here's the new name. This is who you are now. So we took the approach of a internal naming contest, which as I'm sure everyone that's a marketer on this call, as soon as I said that, you probably thought, oh, that's a horrible idea. Like everything's going to go wrong. And I'll admit that I was really, I was at first really hesitant to do it because we all know we've heard of those, internet naming contests where you end up, naming a Bodie McBoatface or whatever. So I was worried about that. But I was really pleasantly surprised. Our employees took it so seriously. We had so many wonderful submissions. And at the end of the day, I think approaching it this way did really make it feel like an organic decision that we made together as a company. And in terms of timing, we launched the contest in the fall of last year. We picked the name in the beginning of this year, so within the first 2 weeks of January, and then we launched at the beginning of April. So we used those first 4 months of the year to really develop the brand identity, update all of our materials, website, etc. So it was aggressive, but we really wanted to be able to spend most of 2024 together under the new name.
No, that's excellent. I think one of the things we talked about in the prep calls was some of the content that goes into the website. And can you talk a little bit? I'm going to start with you, Jordan, on how the content speaks to multiple audiences and how important it is and why it's different in B2G.
Yeah, so we're finding that basically like 50% of our traffic is prospective employees of Rise 8. So, we need to tell them kind of multiple stories. Or appeal to multiple audiences through, so obviously we target Department of Defense, Veterans Affairs, Department of Defense is primarily the Air Force and Space Force. VA obviously focused on very different kind of mission from what the DoD audience might be, and then obviously our prospective employees. So when we're looking at things, we still want, I think we're finding that our look and feel is almost like too skewed to the DoD, Air Force, Space Force, like very military, kind of focused audience. And so like we're trying to bring in, the VA obviously focused on health related outcomes and delivering quality of care and being very empathetic. It's kind of a different mission, similar, they still want to deliver quality outcomes, just like delivering a mission to or an outcome to a warfighter who's in the field, who needs software to work right then and there in the action because it's life or death, but it's also life or death on the operating table. And so we're just looking to appeal to those three audiences. I would say we've got our two core from a prospective perspective, and then the employee audience. Luckily, I think your brand as it appeals to your prospects should appeal to your employees as well. So we have an attitude to Rise 8 about confidence, getting out, achieving outcomes, delivering on the mission. And we feel that the employees that we are recruiting also should share that same attitude. And so we haven't needed to do like a sub brand guidelines for like recruiting efforts, or only we only speak to prospective employees in this way because we're a very transparent organization, and we feel that all of our employees should live the values of Rise 8 as well. So if you go to our site and you look at our About Us page or careers page or what we bring to every mission, you'll find similar language throughout, and that's intentionally done so that our prospects know what they're getting into. We're bringing a certain kind of attitude and capability. And it's because then our employees also bring that same attitude and capability. So hopefully that shares some kind of insight. We haven't had to differentiate our employer experience or prospective employer experience or employee experience, because we feel like our brand should attract both our prospects, partners, and then our employees as well.
Kathy, if you want to, coming from the recruiter hat, talking about employee recruiting is near and dear to my heart. And I think especially in services businesses where, your product is your people, as you developed the very short 2-month, I think it was, game plan for your rebrand, how did you factor in kind of recruitment marketing into your brand strategy?
Is that question directed at me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
No worries.
You know, we worked with our HR firm, but similar to, or with our HR team internally, but similar to what Jordan said, when you're looking at your brand, if it is a strong representation of your culture, and as we looked at things as the colors we chose, when we look at our business, we're in a very serious business. Cybersecurity globally for some of the most important organizations in the world that have the most difficult cybersecurity challenges. So, you know, as Jordan said, when we look at our end users, ultimately lives matter. And, you know, we are supporting elements of the US government and the Five Eyes that our products are critical to their success. So when we looked at the elements of our brand, including how we talk to employees, we wanted everything, just as Jordan was saying, to be cohesive and tell the same story. So our choice to go with black and white, while you might think that's a little stark, we looked at it as it's very direct, it's very straightforward, and those are things that we appreciate in our corporate culture, and that's how we talk to our employees. We are mission oriented as well, so we took the same framework that we would use to describe our organization, and that is the same way we feature ourselves from a recruiting perspective, and that's how we approached it on the brand side.
Kenny, I would love to hear you weigh in on this in terms of content as it relates to brand, and based on what you've heard from Kathy and Jordan, we'll hear from Rikki shortly, but to the extent that, you know, what's your perspective on how content has to parlay into the brand as it relates to employees and also customers or prospects?
I think like the content's just, it's massive. Like, you know, we've all heard the phrase content is king, but it's really content is queen, really. Like if you think about the importance of content, people always kind of associate brand very simplistically with sort of look and feel, but a lot of it is really messaging. You know, I mentioned Apple earlier, and you know, they launched new iPads, right? And you know, you can pay close to $3,000 for their top tier iPad Pro, and that's really aimed at like sort of creative professionals, right? They also just lowered the price of their base level iPad to $300, I think, or $330. And how they talk to each sort of audience, you know, it might be a parent buying a new tablet for their child, or it might be a freelance illustrator who really needs something portable, you know. They talk to them differently, but it's all through their voice. It's all consistent. And I think that when Jordan's talking about sort of, you know, the REQ brand being strong and how they talk to the different audiences, that's a really good example, I think, of like how you can talk to different audiences, but it really ladders up to sort of the overall brand, and the feeling remains the same. You might use certain phrases and things. There's certain isms, I think, that would be specific towards, you know, talking to, you know, a 20-year-old designer in Brooklyn versus, you know, a parent with like 2 children who need new tablets or something. But you all sort of have the same sort of feeling, and it's really interesting to hear both of your approaches. We love doing that for brands. I think a key deliverable for us is really a messaging platform, where we sort of outline, here's your sort of top level messaging. How do you talk to certain audiences? How do you talk internally? How do you talk to employees? How do you talk to prospects? And then we sort of build from there, just so we've got this sort of base level that unifies and aligns everybody.
Elizabeth.
You're on mute again.
Yes, Elizabeth, actually, you said that there's someone who had a question to ask.
Yeah, Kayla, do you want to jump in and ask?
Sure. Hi. Thank you guys so much for what you've already
Kayla.
shared. And this is hi. This is tangentially tied to what we're talking about here, but it's kind of getting more into the detail of the balance between specific commercial audience and then your government audience, and how have you all, not just the look and feel of it, but to Kenny's point, kind of the tone and voice of it, have you had to make major adjustments to accommodate both because the languages are so different, or because the expectations of those audiences are so different? And how has that come to pass for you all? Because that is an area that we are digging into deeper than we ever have before.
You want to start with that one, Rikki?
Sure. I think that I think it's important to keep in mind that your B2G buyers are still, human beings, even though they might use, exponentially more acronyms on a daily basis than the average human. But I think when it comes to your, I guess, brand content, website, sales collateral, like big picture messaging, I still think that keeping the messaging very human, appealing to emotion, is still really important. I think where you have to do the most tailoring is in your BD materials. Obviously, the sales cycle and like the sales approach or process of selling to B2G often involves, responses to RFPs, and a lot of very formal kind of proposal statements of work. And I think that's where you really get into the need to be speaking their language specifically. Something that came up in a conversation I was having with a few folks on the call earlier this week is when you're going through a rebranding process as for a B2G audience, and it's probably the same with other industries, but definitely in ours. You really have to prepare for the contractual, like what contractual changes you're going to need to make. Are you going to novate contracts? Are you not going to novate contracts? Are your existing brand names going to remain legal entities and your new brand name is just going to be a DBA? How are you going to structure that? Not only in your marketing materials, but when do you start responding to RFPs as your new brand name versus your old brand name? I think our audience is pretty used to that, but one thing we learned is that you want to have all of those details nailed down earlier in the process than you think.
Kathy, you're nodding your head too. Was that your experience?
Yeah, no, I definitely agreed with when Rikki was talking about the contractual implications. I mean, that was a large part of the lift is even something as simple as your email address. We went in parallel and are still in parallel where you can reach us at forcepoint.gov as well as everfox.com, because it does take a while for the US government to recognize new entities and not have your email immediately go to spam. But on Kayla's question, Everfox sells both commercial products and products that are ITAR and EAR. So those are restricted to just the government and the Five Eyes. And we absolutely do change our messaging depending upon which audience. There are some messages that we find, particularly in the critical infrastructure space, that simply don't resonate as well with government and vice versa. So yes, we do customize. We have, I think you need to, but I'd say there's 80% commonality, and then the customization is really only about 20%, but it does make a difference because then people do feel like you're speaking to them, speaking their language, particularly as we get into critical infrastructure. There's a lot of OT considerations that we have to factor into our messaging, but I think you're right, Kayla. You do need to customize.
Jordan, anything you want to add? You had mentioned at one point that during our prep call that you do have a very distinct audience. You're not talking necessarily to a commercial audience. It's a little different space. Can you share what your differences have been?
Well, I mean, right now we're primarily, federal government, DoD. I mean, we do about 20%, if that. I mean, I think aspirationally we might do 20% commercially. So I think, to Kayla's question about how you kind of handle it differently, imaging, obviously, so yeah, speak their language, but then also just different look and feel. So I mean, typically I would parse out a separate section for our commercial engagements and campaign landing pages, product offerings, you kind of drive them down that path of your content and web experience. And then that's where the new messaging and new imagery comes in that appeals to them, and even a different, and Rikki said about BD materials. That's, I think, where the rubber hits the road, is really like, getting on the phone with people and just speaking their language, walking them through that commercial sales process versus a government sales process. I mean, we talk about contracting vehicles, getting through their paint, like how easy it is to contract with us. And here's your government contracting vehicles. Commercial, that doesn't apply at all. And so we try to make it, right now our messaging is all about how easy it is to work with us to break, because we have already broken down the barriers, but that is totally going to go over commercial's head. It's more about like, what's their internal process? What's their budgeting cycle? What's their approval process look like, and planning? And then if you get into that wave, there's no contract vehicle issue whatsoever. So yeah, it's echo what everyone else says, just messaging and imagery and setting up like a separate, kind of journey through your site and BD process.
It's interesting. I know that you're all in the B2G space, but it hasn't been uncommon for us within REQ to have a B2G client where we're working more with field marketing. There's a corporate division, and there isn't even a section on the website that speaks to B2G. So if I could interject anything, it would be, if you do have that, if you're in that scenario, the more you can impress upon a corporate organization, corporate communication agencies to have a B2G section that does specifically speak to government, that would be important. Kenny, can you talk a little bit about just your thoughts on activation? It's one thing to have a brand, but we're starting to touch on the topics of activation and having sales collateral, things along that nature.
Sure.
What that looks like after a brand has been defined.
Full honesty, it could be messy, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. I think that in an ideal world, everything would be rolled out really smoothly, 100%, 1000% consistency. There are things in place and deliverables that can be created to kind of try to help hit that 100%. It's possible that some things might fall through the cracks, but I think, again, you want to commit, right? You've gone through this process, whether you went through a longer process or more of a sprint, and regardless of whatever you changed or the reason or reasons why you've changed, I think you want to commit as an organization, every employee, right? You should fully commit yourself so that then when you do activate, you're doing things that are authentic to the new brand. It's more so, or it's a lot less than just making sure you're using the right Pantone colors and everyone's got the new font installed on their computers. That's key, right? I think there are design considerations that are very important and really thought out by lots of folks, including the ones on my team. But also, go beyond that. It's if you're at an event, what does your presence look like? What kind of content might you have at that event? What kind of messaging do you have from the new rebrand that is part of that content, right? Is there a short film potentially? I think that when Kathy talked about sort of the seriousness of what they do and their choice to go, black and white, I have not personally seen any of the messaging. I'd love to kind of see what that sounds like, what that reads like. How do you sort of convey and have a very sort of serious, impactful sort of tone, without going, I think, like too, you know what I mean? But I'd love to see that. I think that activations are incredibly key. You can go through the exercise of a brand, creating one from scratch or redesigning one, but it's the activation that brings it to life. A lot of times it's a wasted opportunity if things aren't activated properly or even at all. So.
Well, what a perfect segue to ask Kathy the question, since I know you shared some thoughts with me earlier about how you did activate, what additional investments you had to do, and then
Yes,
you did your mascot with this.
we were fortunate. We knew all along that we had our sales kickoff at the end of January, so we knew that was our launch date. So we drove to that launch date and that activation. So we had a huge launch party at our sales kickoff where we unveiled the brand. Very different approach than what Rikki talked about. We had kept ours very tight, very small. We did get unsolicited input from employees, but we were on a path with a very small group of decision makers. But one of the things we decided, since it was sales kickoff, is for fun, since our name was Everfox, part of our activation was on the very first day, we shared with employees these foxes with the Everfox, kerchief on it. Again, black and white, like our theme. And we intended that to be a one-time use. We thought it was kind of kitschy and cute for internal employees. We actually had our CEO launching them out of a t-shirt cannon, loads of fun. People have taken to the Fox in a way we did not expect. So now our activation plan does include the Fox, and initially it did not. But we're being asked to take it to events. We've had them stolen from events because people just like the little cuddly toy. But for us, the activation was soup to nuts. I mean, we had to relook at everything. Our internal messaging, we set up our website, we redid all of our booth properties. And to your point, Kenny, I mean, we went through all of our documents, videos, all of the assets that we had, looked at who was using them and which ones were the highest usage so that we could prioritize those. But to your point, we had to rewrite a lot, and we are still in the process of rewriting collateral because it is a different tone and a different approach than our prior company, ForcePoint. The one other thing I want to say that was unique to B2G is your reputation is critical in any business, but in B2G, so much of the sharing is from one customer to another that one of the decisions we made was to include initially in everything formally ForcePoint Federal, because ForcePoint did have a great deal of brand recognition in the government space, and we were throwing this name Everfox at people. We did not want them to not connect us to our previous company. So we had a unique situation there in that we wanted to rely on our history and our experience. So we had a little bit of a tagline that was formerly ForcePoint Federal that we'll keep for all of this year, and then we'll move off of it.
I think we're all hoping we could have some sort of virtual Zoom t-shirt cannon. We gave that this foxes to everybody on this call. I wanted to switch. So talk about timelines. So Kathy, obviously, and I think Rikki too, you had a fairly compressed timeline, and at least in Kathy's case, you had a forcing event called SKO. Jordan, you had mentioned it earlier at the start of this, that you are approaching your rebrand plan in 3 phases. Can you tell us a little bit about the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, we had a really hard time explaining what Rise8 did, and then also our core capabilities, core skill set. Since we're a services agency, people are what we ultimately sell, and we basically send people in to work with government agencies. And so, project 1 was 1A, we took in-house, determining our core capabilities and core skill sets that Rise8 or risers offer to our target audience. So whether or not it's software engineering, cloud, migration, application development, transformation, modernization, really getting clear on when we're going into engagement, what are the core services or skill sets we are actually able to talk to a prospect about. Because that was in theory, we can do anything. Software development is very broad, but do we want to do anything? Not necessarily. So that was kind of 1A, which we're in right now. 1B is then offering and branding services packages. So whether that's I'm going to use, kind of placeholder names, or a rescue package. My project needs to be rescued, or I just need to innovate on my project, or I need to transform my culture. Having 5 or 6 core services bundles. They're named, they have their own branding elements to them, logos, and then iconography. We also have a lot of very complex, the work that we do is very complex. And so how do we actually turn those complex processes into a nice, easy to understand illustration? Right now it's been done kind of in Figma inconsistently, by different people. And so it's how do we actually create a look and feel for all of these complex processes that we speak to a fair bit? So that's all in 1A and 1B. Project 2 is then, let's now expand our brand guidelines. Right, brand guidelines are super strong, but now that we've got our core services and our packages offering, then it's look at our brand guidelines, color palette, fonts, tertiary, secondary colors. and just give us really specific then use cases, like even like a YouTube opening and ending card, LinkedIn posts, and then website examples. And then project 3 is actually the website, like updating the website with, you know, components that are easily flexible and modular. So that's really like, we started out with like, what's the basically defining these 3 phases, and they worked kind of like, you know, we had to do one before the other. And so that's kind of how we've approached it. We've allowed, I mean, ideally in a perfect world, we kind of gave ourselves 4 weeks for every phase, but I think we're finding phase 1 is like 8 weeks. And phase 2 will probably be 8 weeks, and phase 3 will probably be 8 weeks. I hope not, but we're trying to run as fast as we can with a team of 3, and then a great partner as well. So that's how we broke it down, was we, you know, putting the website updates at the end, and then what do we need to kind of get there, and how do we explain that to our partners even through an RFP process.
Right. I think it's one of the things I find fascinating about the story is kind of, or anyone's story when they rebrand, is the why. Why is it happening? You know, in our case, it was M&A. I think with Rikki and Kathy, we got M&A, but in your case, it was really about product portfolio and product expansion plans. And then you're building your brand around that, wrapping it around that.
Yeah, and it's like last thing I'll say on that, part of it is also, I mean, I spoke to kind of like our hardness and like sharpness, and, you know, Kathy mentioned reputation. Right now, our brand has a lot of attitude in it. And if you look at our kind of competitive set or B2G in general, everyone's very vanilla. And so we're like, yeah, if everyone's like at a 1 out of 10, we're like a 10, and like, we're like amped up, like in your face, very bold. But it's, in the year that I've been here, I've learned that this industry is very collaborative, much more collaborative than, you know, I come from B2C and B2B, where it's like very cutthroat, like Coke versus Pepsi, Nike versus Columbia, North Face and Under Armour. Like, you just like, you don't work together, you hate each other. But like B2G is like, we compete against each other in RFPs, but then we'll also sub out some work, or we'll be a sub to them on their contracts. And so you rely on each other. And so it's like a frenemy type of space. And there's more partnerships and relationships in it. And so like we don't want to come from a 10 to a 1 and be very vanilla, but we want to be approachable, and we're a good partner. We are reliable. So we're not, you know, that's like kind of also factoring into our decision to do this. Like, yeah, there was a services offering and an expansion offering and, you know, product offering. Like, there's a whole host of reasons to do this, but it's also, we need to be good partners. And our brand can't rub people the wrong way. And when we're amped up at a 10, it's like, whoa, you're a little bit too aggressive, too bold. And so we want to bring it down to like an 8, you know, just a slight ever like tweak on the dial. And so that's kind of how that's another, you know, reason to this whole process. But yeah, which is like basically culminating in like, everything speaks to now. we got to do it now, because we have a whole host of reasons to make some, you know, an evolution. And that's what we hope it to be. It's just a minor evolution with our branding, and then our messaging and tone from there.
That's excellent. I have so many questions to ask now. I'm gonna pass it to Kenny though, because I want to make sure we get in. We have 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we leave some time for questions. You know, Kenny, just in terms of the, you know, the concept of what's different, what's changed. Do you have any perspective on what you think has changed? I know that REQ did the branding for Ceres many, many years ago. What do you think has changed from then till now?
Yeah, a lot. It's interesting because B2G is in a space that changes as quickly as B2C, or even as B2B, really. But what we're seeing is just a general sort of branding sort of standpoint, regardless of audience, is we're starting to see sort of this sort of a blending of things. Some of it has to do with the internet, some of it has been accelerated by social media and so forth and so forth. But a lot of it is also what Rikki was saying, and how people are understanding and really kind of looking to do business with humans, and to understand the impact of what they do on other humans. It doesn't mean that if you're in the B2G space that you're not a human and you're turning that off while you're at work. You know, the psychology of you as a human being is very much applicable while you're at work, right? Or most of the time, let's say. You're noticing this sort of blending of things, right? In the B2C space, you're seeing food and beverage brands who look like travel brands or who look like lifestyle brands. You're alarmingly seeing CBD and cannabis products marketing looking like food and beverage, or looking like they're being marketed towards children. B2B, you're seeing a lot of more sort of embracing of creativity, of trends that were more prevalent in the B2C space. MailChimp is a great example of what they do, what to do with a B2B brand and kind of have fun. There's lots of other really good examples. In B2G, noticeably, I think, I forgot who said it, but yes, there is a shift from striped stars, columns, government, show the Capitol building. I think that when you want to try to differentiate yourself in B2G, you need some of that, but not all of that necessarily, because you want meaningful differentiation. You have to plant your flag in the ground and say, we are a part of this group, but then everything else you do differently so that then you stand out among the group, because audiences need to know where you fit in. There's a reason why, and there are studies that have been done, there are a reason why lots of bank logos look the same, why nonprofits kind of feel the same way and kind of like talk about the same way, because people kind of need to know sort of where you stand, but then how you sort of stand up. I was going to say rise up, but then Jordan, I don't want to kind of like that, but yeah, so we're starting to see a blending of things. And I think that's personally why I think B2G is really exciting, because there's not a lot of this happening right now. And if you pull sort of the right DNA from outside B2G, I think, you've got a really good opportunity to really be different and be successful ultimately.
Yeah. I'm going to turn it to Kathy because I know that was deliberate. You're black and white, and that maybe that might be a differentiator. Are there other things you use to differentiate? And then I'll turn it to Rikki.
Sure. The other key thing we use to differentiate is shapes. We have a very architectural design to our website and to anything we lay out. I'll be honest, the shapes was a tough sell initially internally because it just was so foreign to our company, but it is something that people are embracing, and you'll see it in everything from our collateral to how we do a LinkedIn post. It's both the shapes and the black and white together that we view as our primary look and feel. And yeah.
That's perfect. Rikki, do you have any commentary on how do you stand apart in the sea of sameness?
I think one thing we try to prioritize in our imagery is really having images that are the customers of our customers, and the representations of the people that the customers we work with are serving. So for example, in our all of our messaging, all of our marketing materials around our WIC product, we have pictures of, moms and their babies. And we're trying to really avoid the traditional stock photography. I think that's really important. We are also, I think that brand identity in terms of like your color palette and your fonts and all of that, I think personally, it's fun, right? I'm sure many of us on this call enjoy working on that. But I think it's important to keep in mind that you really only control a portion of your brand. I mean, you can define your brand identity internally with look and feel and name, but ultimately your brand is determined by your reputation in the market and the work that you're doing. So you can have an amazing brand, but if you're, performing really poorly in the market, or if you are not delivering results for your customers, your brand identity doesn't really matter, right? So I think if you're going through a rebrand, it's important to keep that in mind. And it's also important to circulate that message internally, because I think it's easy for folks outside of marketing to think that, if we pick the wrong name, or we pick the wrong color, or we pick the wrong logo, it's going to have these catastrophic consequences. And it's not to say that those things are important. They are, of course. As a marketer, I want that to be important because that's my job. But it's only a piece of your brand identity, and the reputation in the market and the work that you're doing is still paramount.
Yeah. Can I just add quickly to that? I'm really glad you mentioned that. We talk to clients and prospects and we let them know that, brand isn't a magic bullet. It's not going to solve any sort of underlying issues that you might have operationally or whatever. It's akin to kind of feeling bad about your day and going out and buying a really fancy leather jacket or something. You know, you might feel good temporarily, but you're not really sort of fixing what's inherently troubling you. Brands sometimes can help in that, can greatly assist in that, but it's definitely not like the end all be all.
For those of you willing to share, are there things that you, not just lesson learned, I'd call it, but things you would not do again? I know Rikki said she was really hesitant about the employee contest, but, and we're talking about this prior to this call, she put some structure and governance around it in a way that made it work out okay. Are there things you guys just, lesson learned would say, okay, don't do
Lessons
that.
learned, yeah.
Advice, yeah. Advice to the group, don't do this.
I have one, and mine is keep an open mind. When our brand company presented the names, you know, our instant reaction was, oh, I don't like that, or I don't like this. And, you know, they quickly said, hey, this is the only time we're going to ask you to not provide any feedback. Let us get through all the names, all the reasons why we picked these companies, and try to put your personal biases aside. My learning is that's absolutely what you need to do, because when I first heard the name Everfox, I was like, hell no. I can't see that ever being our company name. And I was tempted to kick it out. And our brand agency was like, no, there's a good reason, leave it in there. And they were right. You know, so to me, it's know your company, but at the same time, have an open mind as to what's the appropriate brand for your business.
I can chime in here, and I mentioned this on our kind of prep call, but one thing important to us was, well, a quick one, since we broke up our evolution into phases, it allowed us in the RFP to communicate that like a single vendor might not get all phases. And so that allowed vendors to kind of play to their strength. And actually then it was obvious on the RFP responses that some were more interested in pieces of it than others based on their strengths. So some people didn't want to touch the website, they wanted to focus more on the brand guidelines, and then vice versa. So it allowed us to then evaluate vendors based on their capability in each phase, even though like all three, you know, need to be done. And ideally it would have been awesome to have just one vendor, but it did allow us to then, like, you know, chunk it up if needed. Two, with the majority of, like, we ended up going with one vendor for project 1A and 2, which is like all the branding and naming conventions and messaging piece. When we really got down to the short strokes and the really like scorecard, we then anticipated our key stakeholders internally. And if anything was going to like potentially derail, like, you know, are we gonna get derailed at any point of time in this process? And if yes, who is going to handle that the best? Who is going to be the best partner for us to like change course or adapt? And so that really what it came down to, or that was a really big deciding factor for us, was like finding the right partner that fit with our work style and could kind of like, we're a team of 3. We're just kind of like more free flowing right now, instead of like the big machine where you got a 40-person marketing team and a 40-person agency, and you're just like all structure and process and trying to keep like everything, you know, millions of projects on the go at once. And so, yeah, finding the right partner really was important to us, and just thinking of like what could go wrong, and if something goes wrong, who's going to handle that the best with us and adapt with us, instead of getting into like a rescoping, extra, you know, doubling of the budget and just really creating tension. And so that's a tip that I would share if you're going to go through the process.
That's
Rikki,
really
any
helpful. I'm struck by that. I've hired, you know, many agencies during the course of my former marketing career, and I don't think I ever factored that one in.
Yeah. We've got just a couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat at this moment, and we'll turn it to you, Rikki. What would your piece of advice or lessons learned be?
I think making sure that you have a really firm process in place for the ultimate decision. If you're choosing a name, or even if you're just designing a new logo, who's going to be the final decider? Like, does anyone have a final veto? Who's going to be involved? Who's not going to be involved? I was really happy that we defined that early on in the process, and I think that's why we were able to come to a decision so quickly. So I think that's really important. Another lesson learned is have a really clear plan in place for communicating the name internally. If you are planning on communicating it internally before you communicate it externally, which was important to us because we again wanted it to feel like a kind of community effort. We had a lot of policies in place about like, okay, here's the schedule for announcing the name publicly. Here's what you can and cannot do before then. Not like, our name is a state secret or anything. I mean, nothing catastrophic was going to happen if no one was going to leak our name to the press. And if someone did, I would count it as a win, honestly. But I think it's important to have those policies in place just so nothing gets too chaotic.
Kenny, any last pieces of advice or thoughts of what to look out for?
I guess speaking from the other side, on the agency side, I like what Kathy was saying about, going in with an open mind. However, that being said, you guys know your business best and you know your audiences. And you can certainly find the right partner and hopefully you find an honest, authentic partner, somebody who's not just going to, take the check and just churn out work, but you form a sort of really sort of meaningful and respectful partnership with them. But so much of creative is subjective. And I think she used the word bias, and it's totally true. From naming to colors and shapes and everything, people have all sorts of associations. And most of those associations are not professional, they're personal. They're rooted in their life experiences. And so when you're meeting with partners or when you're reviewing work, I think if you can take a step back and have a measured, objective approach or response to the work that's put in front of you, that's at the end of the day, even if you reject the ideas put forth, that's something that me and I know the other members of my team would be grateful for. Just that chance to have it be objectively reviewed. If it's not a home run, it's not a home run, but at least you get back together again and hopefully the next one is. So that's all for me.
That's excellent. We do have one question. We're going to try to sneak in real quick from Mark, if you want to say hello and ask your question about co-branding and MDF.
Sure. Am I off mute?
Yep. You're
Okay, good. So one of the experiences, maybe in some cases challenges, that I've run across over the years is utilizing MDF funds strategically and most effectively. We, just to use an example, had a significant MDF relationship with AWS a while back. We looked at, different strategies, one of which was just, putting both logos on signage and strategic places and, some digital advertising and even some press releases. We actually created some owned media as well. And I thought all of that was fine. But I couldn't help but just kind of walk away and think, there's got to be a better strategy out here other than just relying on kind of that basic blocking and tackling. So I'm just wondering if anybody's had experience integrating those other brands. In my cases, we were IT services company, and AWS obviously provided something different. Creating, I guess, an integrated strategy and any pitfalls or advantages.
Anyone want to answer that?
I can chime in. I think the key with those relationships is create like a campaign-based approach and consistency. I think, especially with some of the big players, it's tempting to just do like, a single webinar or a single case study or some type of paid content placement. But those one-off initiatives, I think, rarely lead to results. And so I think that having a more long-term plan and getting buy-in from the partner, even if they're the bigger player, is important.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely, I agree. I mean, I guess what I was thinking about was, how do you, so you already are running campaigns, right, as part of your branding strategy or rebranding strategy. Your MDF partner is doing the same thing, typically targeting, the same agency or military command or department. Where does the rubber kind of hit the road there, right? What do you do to actually integrate those campaigns effectively and maybe measure them as well?
I'll take a pass. The measurement piece, very hard. It's all self-reported by the partner. We've been looking for ways to get beyond self-reporting. I don't have an answer for you, but I think like Rikki said, for us, it does depend on the size of the partner. Like when we're working with Microsoft or AWS, we're the smaller partner and we're pretty much gonna follow a lot of their recommendations to get something out the door. Whereas when it's partners that are same size or are smaller than us, we like to put together campaign in a box. And it's very much like Rikki said, our intent is not to have that one and done. It's a fully developed campaign plan with multiple elements in it that can last for a minimum a quarter, if not longer. And, we work with Carasoft a lot. They help us in terms of making those campaign kits effective and also sharing them with partners that might be interested in participating in it as well. So I think partners is a really, really hard one. And I don't know, I haven't found a silver bullet anywhere on the partner side. I mean,
yeah, I think you're right, Kathy. It is difficult. It depends on the situation. Kind of depends. Are you partnering to win a particular bid? Are you partnering to position yourself with a new or emerging customer? But I like your terminology, in a box. I think that's good, and that may be the best that we can do.
Well,
Thank
that
you.
may be a future webinar, so we're gonna have to wrap this up. No, thank you for your question, Mark, and thanks everyone for questions and to the panelists for participating. And just so you know, we, as Elizabeth actually put into the chat, we're doing another webinar July 11th with Kenny Rufino and Stephen Constant in our office. Our brand strategist, he's phenomenal. I've known him and that he's in that 20-year category. So appreciate everybody being here, and everyone will receive the copy of this recording. And thank you for joining us today.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's a
Elizabeth.
wrap. Thank you.
Thank you.